If anybody's not, if you're not happy, and you certainly, we won't be sharing pictures, but if you want to be sure, turn your video off. And I think that's all I need to say to start with, other than once more to welcome you all. Now there's 50 of you, and hand over to Peter.
Thanks, Tony. And can I add my welcome to everyone. It's great to have quite so many people here. We've got 51 so far. We have had more at our meetings because buses are hugely important to communities right across Somerset, and we have every reason to be quite concerned about the bus services that we have here. Just by way of introduction, Tony, who was just speaking now, he was the founder of Somerset Bus Partnership, and he invited Glenn Burrows to be the representative for Sedgemoor, John Hassel for South West and Taunton, both of whom are very well known locally and more widely than that. And I'm the representative for Mendip. One of the things we'll be looking for is to see in what ways you can get involved and what help you can provide, and what help we can provide to you. But first of all, I'm going to just run through the 190 pages of the Somerset Bus Service Improvement Plan in about 15 minutes. So it's a very top-line summary, but hopefully it'll help set the scene, and for those who haven't ploughed through the 190 pages, give you some idea about how ambitious the Somerset Bus Service Improvement Plan indeed is. But let's start, because it's in the news, with COP26 and our Prime Minister, who repeatedly tells you how he loves buses. He certainly does. He's the ex-mayor of London, where, of course, there were major advances in bus services there. And he insisted that once they left their private jets behind and their luxury yachts in the Mediterranean, when they got to Glasgow, they actually went and were transported on double-decker buses. And here's dear Boris, not stumbling this time, but running up the steps into a meeting. There's real significance in this, though, because it is actually Boris Johnson who has made buses such a key part of the climate emergency strategy of the government. It's very much been driven by him, and he's clearly intent on keeping buses center stage by this decision to transport leaders of the world on a London double-decker, which I'm sure they enjoyed very much. So it's really good news for buses. And he provided £3 billion worth of funding for Bus Back Better. Quite a lot of that funding has already now been spent, keeping buses running during the COVID epidemic, which leads me on to say that though it's very exciting, the future for buses now, the last 18 months have been very difficult. COVID saw a catastrophic fall in all forms of mass transit, whether it's planes, cruising, or railways or buses. Huge drop off in numbers for very understandable reasons. So these are very difficult times for bus companies, aggravated by now the very serious driver shortage. And I'm sure many of you, certainly in my part of Mendip, we're seeing bus services cut because of the shortage of drivers and replacing drivers is going to take some time and cost quite a lot of money. So last week, Somerset County Council, their officers and their consultant, WSP. WSP is one of the leading transport consultancies in the world who've been working very hard with the team at Somerset County Council against a really tough deadline. They've only had 6 months to put together this report. As I say, it's 190 pages. It's packed with really useful and interesting information and some very clear views as to how Somerset should go forward. That went off to government last week, and we all now are awaiting the response of government. Another 80 local transport authorities also sent theirs off to the Department for Transport, so it will take them some time to consume all that information. But the outcome will be dependent on the views of the government on each local authority's bus service improvement plan, which, as I'm sure you all know by now, is generally reduced to being called a BSIP. So if we look at what was in the Somerset document, lifted out 1 or 2 specific points about where we're starting from in Somerset, which is not really where we would like to start from, but it's the situation Somerset is in today. First thing to say that Somerset has, as have all the districts, declared a climate emergency, and transport in Somerset accounts for over 44% of all carbon emissions. That's 60% higher than it is on average in the rest of the country. So for Somerset, undoubtedly transport is an absolutely key factor if they are going to achieve net zero by 2030. The issue of private cars, and particularly single occupancy private cars, is a real challenge for Somerset, and there is a need to move more people onto using buses. In fact, only 1% of all commuted journeys in Somerset are currently made by buses. Depends which way you look at it. That's a great opportunity to improve, but it is a pretty shocking statistic. We are a hugely car-dependent county, and cars account for 84%. Rail, a very small percentage, and active travel makes up most of the rest. Active travel is being increasingly effectively promoted in the county, but it's suitable for most people only a limited range of journeys. I said we didn't start from a good point. Somerset has the 4th lowest bus use per population in England, and it's the very lowest in the southwest. This is according to the BSIP, the Somerset BSIP, which was submitted last week. Yet, if we went back 10 years, we see that Somerset is a middle-ranking southwestern authority in terms of bus usage. It has been the really sharp decline that's happened in the last 10 years. And on data which was only released today by the Department for Transport, Somerset, which was the 4th lowest in the country, has now slipped to being the 2nd worst local transport authority in England for use of buses. As I said, this isn't where we started from, but this indicates the scale of challenge that the Somerset team, their officers, their consultants, with a fair bit of advice thrown at them by the Somerset Bus Partnership and many others, have been wrestling with these past 6 months. How do we do something about this truly dismal situation that Somerset is in as far as bus transport is concerned? So I've now corrected that. We're not the 4th lowest, we are the second lowest bus user. And then if you look on the right-hand side, over the last 10 years, bus usage has declined by 40% in Somerset. This was driven in part by a national trend, but very much through bus cuts, which during the period of austerity were imposed, subsidies were reduced, evening and weekend services were slashed. And as a result, many people just had to give up using the bus and find cars or other forms of transport as a means particularly of getting to work. What's worrying was pre-COVID, the 5 years before COVID, the decrease was accelerating rather than going down. So John Woodman, Somerset's cabinet member for highways and transport, the politician who's overseen the work done by his team, has announced that this is an ambitious plan. The government asks for an ambitious plan, and he says we're aiming high. And that is absolutely the case. Because in fact, Somerset is asking for £163 million from the government to improve its bus services. It must be one of the highest bids in the country. Per capita, almost certainly the highest bid in the country, but it indicates the scale of challenge in Somerset with their bus services. But the really good thing is that John Woodman and his officers and their consultants recognise the scale of challenge and have produced a plan which is ambitious. It's an eye-watering sum of money. I mean, all of you have been and are concerned about buses. Who would have thought that Somerset would be asking for £163 million over a period of years to improve its bus service? It has, however, got to be said that it was stated at the cabinet meeting I attended a couple of weeks ago that these improvements would not be a burden on the Somerset ratepayer. All this money was going to be asked for from government, with no plans by Somerset, despite its climate emergency commitment, to increase the level of support at this stage for buses. Other local authorities have viewed it differently, but Somerset is saying to the government, we need the money from you to help us sort out the pretty dire state of our bus services. So £163 million, one really important thing we all can do, because many people on this call have got political connections with different parties, may know people of influence in government or close to government. What we really need to, all of us do, is lobby and make the case that Somerset, it might not feel like a county which is in desperate need of government support for buses, but in reality, as that figure showed, the earlier figures show, it is a county which really needs a priority with the funding. That 163 million, it's been estimated, could be as much as 10% of the remaining budget of what's left in the Bus Better funding. So it is a hugely ambitious bid by Somerset, which has already had the support, very active support, of two of our MPs. David Warburton has written to Grant Shapps, the Minister of Transport. Rachel Powell has also written. We need to get all of our Somerset MPs to write. You need, I would suggest, to write to your MP and say how important this issue is for the climate emergency, for the levelling up agenda of the government, and make the case for us getting the money that Somerset is asking for. So if we're going to spend £163 million, we should expect quite a lot for it. And there is, in the 190-page document, a 2-page spread listing the 21 top benefits of the BSIP. And I'm not, you'll be relieved to hear, not going to go through all 21, but I would just pick out one or two. One of the ones which accounts for a good chunk of that money is by 2030, all our buses in Somerset will be replaced by zero emission buses. I mean, the capital cost of that is very substantial, but it will mean that by 2030 we've got a brand new fleet. At the moment, we've only got a very small number of Euro 6 emission buses, and the other buses operating in the county do emit a fair bit of carbon. So that's a really big stage one. Second one is the county council, the team have identified a core county-wide network. And whilst we in the Somerset Bus Partnership and individual bus routes might be challenging the emission of some of the core routes, overall, we welcome the fact that a core network has been identified and they will get buses every 60 minutes. And those buses will run at least from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. And it's been recognised again by Somerset, whereas they didn't necessarily do this for the past 10 years, that there is a need for nighttime buses, particularly in, say, Taunton, and getting to and from Taunton, and likewise getting to and from Bristol and Bath, where nighttime economies are an awful lot of jobs in the service industry, and unless there are buses coming back late at night, people living in Somerset can't take advantage of them. Cost of travel is being shown by a lot of research to be absolutely crucial in winning more customers. And one of the interesting initiatives that Somerset has come up with, and there are some very interesting initiatives, this is one of them, a reduced flat fare, £1 get around town trial. Obviously, it's only really of benefit to people living in urban areas, but it's trying to get people to stop using their car and use buses for just popping down to the pub, out for a meal, whatever it is, that there will be, or to the shops, there will be buses which will be there and running with a sufficient frequency to make them a very real alternative to going by car. And probably one of the most remarkable innovations, excuse me, is this initiative for introducing discounted fares for 16 to 25-year-olds. This is really an idea of catch them whilst they're still young enough before they bought a car or possibly bought a second car, and trying to get them into the habit of going by bus. A lot of people in this county, I know from the research we've done, just feel it's somewhat demeaning to go on a bus. They just don't want to do it. We need to change that ethos, and one of the best ways of doing it is changing it amongst young people. And so there was some argument, some budgeting figures as to what the discount would be, but the current thinking was announced at the cabinet meeting is that it will be 33% fares. And this is a very important initiative within the overall BSIP, as you'll see later on. And last, but certainly by no means least, because Somerset is a very rural county, this is picking up on the work which has been done in South Somerset with digital demand responsive transport. This is to be rolled out across rural areas throughout the county, which will see a transformation of bus services in many, many communities. So those are some of the highlights. But overall, these 21 boxes that you can see on the screen, or you can see most of them, they're about actually improving not just the functionality, but also the quality of traveling by bus, the regularity, the frequency, the ease of information, the quality of the actual ride itself, the speed if it's a long distance interurban bus service of getting from town A to town B, all the things to try and address the perceived negatives of going by bus. It's a very, very, very ambitious program. And if you were spending 163 million and you're in business, you would, well, you wouldn't very often have 163 million to spend, but you'd want to have some KPIs, some targets. And we've been given some targets, and they are as ambitious as the 163 million is. The passenger growth figures, yes, we're starting from a very low baseline, much lower than the baseline that you can see on your screen, because we're 18 months into a COVID epidemic, which has really damaged the numbers on public transport. It's going to take a couple of years from now to get the numbers back up to what it was pre-COVID, it is thought. These are highly speculative figures, because we may well yet see promotions and activities and advertising campaigns to try and encourage a faster return. But by 2030, and this is all geared to 2030 net zero, it's hoped that each year the passenger growth in Somerset will be 5%. Over the period, bus passengers will increase by 40%. Still has to be said that will be less than what it was 10 years ago, but it's a huge increase, as you can see, from what it was at the beginning of this particular period. Perhaps an even bigger challenge is that the news about Somerset currently is always bad. When you look at customer satisfaction levels, Somerset is bottom of that league table, absolutely at the bottom of that league table. It has the worst satisfaction levels in the whole country. Figure of 47% is given. They're saying within 5 years, that satisfaction level is targeted to go to 70%, and in another 5 years up to a really high level of 80%. These are challenging targets, and one has to say that one hopes that the officers and possibly the politicians who have set them will be around to answer for them in 2025 or 2030, because these are challenging targets. But we have to achieve these to justify the amount of money that Somerset is asking for. I mentioned the youth fair, 16 to 25, and said that it was a really crucial part of the overall strategy. And so it is, because at the moment, pre-COVID, 16 to 25s are only accounting for 15% of all tickets sold. By 2025, they want that to go up to 40%, and by 2030, 50%. So in other words, buses, instead of being a vehicle of transport very often for older people, are now also going to be a vehicle of transport for younger people. A really radical transformation, and a very interesting and, I would suggest, exciting initiative from Somerset. And then the key KPI is the modal shift, the shift from car to bus. Very tentative figures here. but still very ambitious figures. By 2030, a 7 to 10% switch. They're going to keep reviewing these figures because we're in a very fluid situation at the moment. But with the way that petrol prices are escalating, you don't need to tax petrol. It's just going up at the pumps regardless of tax. And so there's every incentive at the moment to look to an alternative from driving your car. So what we're all about, and what we would like Somerset to be all about, is consulting. Yes, they have to work in an enhanced partnership with the bus operators. This is the fundamental change from the way buses have been running for the last 30 years. It's now a partnership between the local authority, in this case Somerset, and the private sector bus operators, whether that's First, Buses of Somerset, or one of the many smaller bus operators like Fairsaver, or a whole host of them across Somerset. There is going to be a partnership of local authority and bus operator. But they're relying on £183 million worth of public money. And so there also needs to be consultation with bus users. That's what the Bus Back Better document says. That's what Boris Johnson says is the way it has to be done. And as soon as the government has determined its stance on the bid by Somerset, every 6 months, so we're talking about next April, there will be a review, and come October of next year, there will be another formal document produced, updating and reporting back and discussing with government funding, which will have to be issued. And as part of all of that, there will have to be consultation with bus users. We would like to see, and one of the reasons why we're so pleased to see so many people have joined us from across Somerset, we would like to feel that there was a way of getting the views of local communities, whether that's a parish or a town, or in the case of Wells, a city. We'd like to see those views reflected and passed on and argued and presented to the officers in Somerset. The decisions about buses should not be left to officers sitting in their Taunton depots, and they should be very much influenced by the people who actually use the buses. It's those people who know what they need, they know what's wrong with the buses, and there needs to be a form of consultation which is a constructive one. I've been part of First Bus consultation groups up in this part of Mendip, and we sat down with the management of First and talked about the problems and the issues and our complaints, and they've told us their constraints, the fact that they do need to make money out of this, and we tried to find ways of coming up with solutions. I wouldn't claim that we've always been satisfied, but there has been a spirit of consultation, and that's the spirit which we would like to engender, and we think that Somerset wants to encourage going forward in terms of the Somerset BSIP. We want to work together to get better bus services for the whole of Somerset and every community in Somerset. And as part of that, the Somerset Enhanced Partnership is setting up 2 consultative groups. One is the advisory board, which is the senior board. That's going to be the local authority and the bus operators, but also with bus user representatives, where the key commercial issues will get hammered out. Then over and above that, there is going to be the bus user and stakeholder group, where very much in the same way as we've done in the past with First, one will sit around and discuss the issues with the bus operators, with the local authority too, but primarily with the bus operators trying to find ways of improving the services, knowing that there's an awful lot of money now available to improve the services. This is a quantum change from what's happened for the last 10 years in Somerset, where there's been no more money. All of a sudden there is money. It's how it gets divided up. What are the priorities, which obviously Somerset will determine, but we trust they will listen to bus users and be influenced by the views of those bus users. And consultation doesn't always deliver results. I have to say that Somerset were told repeatedly in their surveys and in discussions that I think every group had with them, that one of the absolute fundamentals for so many bus users is actually having the bus times at the bus stop. This is the way it used to be. For many people, they don't actually have smartphones or even computers at home. In the bus passenger charter, the only sources of information which are listed as requirements are all online listings, which is good. They're all very good, but we need information at bus stops. Ideally, it will be real-time information, but that's not going to be in every village and hamlet across Somerset, but it needs to be increasingly in the towns in Somerset, and that's part of the BSIP. But also we need to have the information in some printed form at those bus stops. It's admittedly been difficult during COVID with so many timetable changes, but that should be the objective, to get back to having timetable information at the bus stops. And that's going to be a point that we will be hammering hard to Somerset in our sessions with them. So coming back to the £163 million, it is ambitious. It is breathtakingly ambitious. It's very exciting that Somerset has been so ambitious, but there is the possibility they may not get all that amount of money. Which then leads on to what happens to that BSIP that they've just put forward. And what will happen is that there will need to be discussions about priorities. And indeed, the government may give guidance on those priorities, but they will almost certainly be a revised version of the BSIP, which is where consultation comes in. And I think one of the key messages coming out of the Somerset Bus Partnership is that we need to find a way of representing views, hearing views, giving the opportunities for views to be expressed and then communicated to Somerset and indeed to the bus operators as well. And so the key aim of the Somerset Bus Partnership is to encourage and to work with Somerset and the bus operators in a constructive, consultative way to help ensure that they deliver a bus service that the communities of Somerset need. So it's exciting times, really exciting times, but they remain very challenging. So thank you for listening to me. I'm now going to hand over to Tony, unless anybody's got any urgent questions they want to raise, and invite Tony then to talk about the role that we see for the bus partnership and the part that you can all play within that.
Peter, just one clear point, just to put this in perspective. David Redgewell, we've obviously been working with the Metro Mayor and the Bristol Mayor, but more with Dan. Dan Norris has only got £540 million for the West Midlands Combined Authority area over 5 years to improve buses in the north of the county. So that puts it in perspective as to what money might be available. And all I would say to everybody on this call, that's very ambitious and I fully support it, but without the lobbying of the MPs and the lobbying of the regional bodies to make sure the Southwest gets a fair share of the government money, that is where we are. I mean, it's only 3 billion, so it really is a political issue with a small p or a large p. It needs to engage all politicians of all colours in, and it's about the Southwest regional settlement, not just the Somerset settlement, because we often underperform in the Southwest when it comes to public transport money, whether it's road, rail, or buses. So it really's got to have that message to Baroness Veer and Grant Shapps and to Rishi Sunak that the Southwest has got to be an area that they target some money into for rural buses. So that would be my point to everybody in the room. Don't spend the money before you've got it. And the most important thing at the moment is to lobby for the money, bearing in mind that Somerset County Council will vanish in about 18 months' time. And so will all the districts, and we'll be left with the new unitary authority for Somerset, and then whatever happens in the north with North Somerset joining Wecker. So there'll be two prominent authorities in the county, what the old historic county of Somerset is. My only thing to people in Yeovil is that your fate depends on what you do with Dorset, because at the moment, an awful lot of your buses that are funded with the limited resources from Dorset County Council. So in the Yeovil in particular, you've got to work very, very closely with Dorset County Council and make sure Somerset and Dorset sort out their situation. I'm just worried that Dorset will pay for evening services into Yeovil on the east side and the south side, but Somerset won't then respond by the rest of it. So I think there's some real issues on cross boundaries, and if it's people in West Somerset, can I just say to you that you need to engage as well in the Devon bus service improvement plan, because buses like the 25 and anything coming into Minehead from Limmer has to appear across that border and be funded. Otherwise, you're not going to get the resources, and it's equally about Frome and Wiltshire. So it's about David. Working cross-boundary, working together. There is a regional transport board.
David, we do have other people. Okay, thank you.
Just final point. Just the final point of the lobbying. There's two regional transport boards. One covers Somerset, Devon, Cornwall, Plymouth and Torbay. That's called South West Peninsula. There's one called Gateway, which covers the two northern unitaries, Wiltshire, Gloucestershire. So I couldn't even write myself here. Bournemouth, Paul and Christchurch. We need to lobby those to make sure they put buses at the top of their agenda for government resources. And that's my final point, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks. For those who don't know David, he's one of the most active public transport campaigners, has worked very closely with us and is a source of enormous information and incredibly active. We've got 3 hands up. I think Chris Allen, if you like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just a matter of interest. How much does the average new bus cost? That's carbon-free, zero, whatever. Roughly, how much does the average bus cost?
David might want to correct me on this, but my understanding is it's about $250,000.
Okay, and do you know how many buses are operational?
Gas. So, just to say to your gas or electric bus, like they've got in Glasgow for 2030, they're about £400,000 to £500,000 a bus. So that's the kind of resources that the government's looking at with the bus industry at the moment. That's what the new stuff is in Glasgow as we speak tonight.
Can I just also ask, roughly how many buses have we got now operational in this area, and how many?
You know the answer to that.
It's in the BSIP. I have read the figure. If anybody knows it offhand, I have a figure in the back of my mind, but I'm not sure it's the right one.
Thank you.
I believe it's 113, but I'm just plucking a figure from memory.
Right.
The fleet's more than that, Peter. I think that's just the fleet in the northern north of Somerset area from Wales and Western Depot. You've got Bath, you've got Taunton, Yeovil, Bridgewater and Minehead. So you pull more than likely into about 400 vehicles by first group across the Somerset region, and probably about nearly 100 with the smaller operators.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure during the meeting we'll check that out in the BSIP and we'll confirm that, Chris. Jane Walker. If you could just say where you're from, Jane, it would be helpful.
Oh, St Cuthbert's Out Parish Council, which
know it well.
the town of Wells, yeah. Following on from the last speaker, yeah, I'm not aware of any survey of the public, not stakeholders, but actual public, who have prioritised decarbonising the bus fleet. And it seems from the figures we've just heard that 160 million is not quite enough to decarbonise the bus fleet, which is not ours in any way, shape or form, but the property of private companies. So is this just an exercise to throw money at the impoverished stagecoach group so that they can tick some green boxes and avoid a carbon tax in the future? You know,
I'd be
very surprised if one more
correct that?
Please,
can I
David,
correct
go
that,
ahead.
please? Peter, that is not true. That is not true. The buses, some of the buses in your own area were purchased by the West Midlands Combined Authority, or to be fact, South Gloucestershire Council on behalf of the 4 unitaries. There's 90 to 100 buses in Bristol, some of which run into Somerset and rural Somerset. They're actually gas, hydrogen gas, they're gas powered. They're all owned effectively jointly with the local authorities. So this is investment by the government and the local councils. They might say first on the side of the bus, doesn't mean to say that's who's funded it or bought it. So I think that's very misleading. The Stagecoach don't operate in Somerset. It's First Group predominantly. And my figures, by the way, include all the northern depots that may not be in the Somerset BSIP, but serve Mendip, North Somerset and down into Sedgemoor. So they will not necessarily be in the figures, but that is the first operating territory, both buses of Somerset and First West of England.
So you're saying that these buses actually belong to the public?
Some of them, yes.
Some cases, yeah.
Really? Fine, yeah. It doesn't look like they belong to the public, so it's easy to make the mistake that they might belong to a private company.
Michael Larry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Michael Larry, Bridgewater Town Council. I do work with Glen Boroughs for the Sedgemoor area. I'm a little bit in terms of the improvement plan. I can't see where increased routes, bus routes, are really being organised as a connectivity network by the local authority. It seems to be based on demand, a bespoke demand. And also, do we know if with other local authorities and transport authorities surrounding Somerset, if they've taken the view that they're not going to put any money in to their bids? Thank you.
We've been told that Wiltshire is putting some money into their bid. I don't know the scale of that, but they're looking at investing in their buses, as Wiltshire has done for quite some time, and their bus performances has been much more impressive over the past 5 years than Somerset's has. So I think the reality is that Somerset's budgeting has been very tight. They've had many issues during the whole period of austerity, and rightly or wrongly, buses have had to bear some of the brunt of the cuts that Somerset's experienced. I think the change is going forward, almost certainly, I would say certainly, we are going to get more money. The debate is how much more money. So that will change the tone of bus operations to a significant extent. As far as routes are concerned, I think what they've looked to do is they've looked at the core routes as they've described them, because that's where the proven demand is, and they've looked to improve the service on those core routes, because that will be the most cost-effective way of spending the money that the government might choose to give them. Debbie.
Thank
Debbie
you.
Taylor, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarity on something you'd said earlier on. You said that by 2030, all buses are to be replaced by zero emission buses.
Mm.
Well, I live in Porlock and we have a very tiny bus and it's already every 2 hours. Does that fall on within that, what you said there, those buses will also be replaced? Or are you focusing mostly on bigger buses?
I mean, all I'm doing is quoting what Somerset have said in their BSIP. That was a direct lift from the BSIP. They are saying in their plan, all buses will be replaced.
Peter, sorry, just to clarify something there, that is the Department for Transport target from Grant Shapps for England.
Yeah.
So I think Scotland and Wales got their own, but their own governments, but that's every bus in the English fleet by 2030 will be decarbonised and should be clean fueled. So we're looking at electrification, we're looking at hydrogen, we're looking at gas. It's a huge target, but that is the target he set.
Okay.
I think, Tony, why don't you take over now? And
Right. Thank you all very much for your comments. I would recommend reading the Somerset Bus Service Improvement Plan. We can't discuss it here. We can only report what's gone into it. There are parts of it that we were critical of. I think as Somerset Bus Partnership, we have had an input to it, and we have been part of trying to get some of the ideas of bus users and local people into it. So what happens from here onwards? I set this group up originally because I saw in the bus strategy that the government produced back in March, the words consultation appeared quite strongly, and the local authorities were required to consult. And as Peter pointed out, there are two bodies set up to monitor and review the Bus Service Improvement Plan, which is supposed to be a living document. There'll be a bus advisory board, which will include the chairman of the stakeholder group, and there will be a stakeholder group. Stakeholder group will possibly only need to report back once a year, but once the stakeholder group exists, then we will have an opportunity for lobbying our local authority, Somerset County, and when it comes of age, the unitary authority that takes over. What I think is needed is a local network of people, and that's why we called this meeting today. We've had a couple of other public meetings, whereby my vision is that each village and each town has somebody within that area that is interested enough in buses, willing to go out and talk about buses to local people and to bring back ideas from them. It will be a hard job in convincing Somerset County Council to spend the money wisely. We know that, but I think it's better to have some sort of network of people around the place. Let me start by saying what we can offer as Somerset Bus Partnership to some of those to you. How can we help you? We have, between those of us who set up Somerset Bus Partnership and the people who've joined us, some expertise in the way buses are run and the knowledge of how things do get done, and from some of our friends across in other counties, what actually works in trying to get councils to change. We have a website, somerset-buspartnership.co.uk, where we can highlight what's going on. But we can help with Facebook pages, with Twitter and with LinkedIn and other forms of social media. We can help with advice and suggestions. We can make introductions and set up meetings. We can try and produce a branding of what we feel is needed, a branding of Somerset Bus Partnership, so that we can go to the council and say we represent the people of Somerset. I've lost the thing I was reading from. I'll get it back in a moment. And we can set up news briefings and prime social media content. And we can set up meetings like this if you really want to meet back all together. But the other side of it is people have asked me, if you're looking for representatives, what are they expected to do? And part of the answer to that is I want you to try and think about it and let us know. Sorry, I've lost that. And let us know what you think. But what I think is needed is somebody local, somebody on the ground who knows about the buses in their area, keeps an eye out, talks to people, and comes back with ideas and any issues that need change. Reporting them to the relevant authority, and knowing who that is at the moment is still somewhat confused and confusing, and may still be when we have a unitary authority. It still may be difficult to identify, so we can help identify who you should talk to, but we can also help if you actually report back to us as the Somerset Bus Partnership as to what's going on in your area. We might ask you to do perhaps a report once every 3 months or so, just on what are the issues in your area. The Bus Service Improvement Plan asks government for a lot of money. Part of that money is actually building a team within the county council who will be doing things and responsible for things like bus stops, bus shelters, timetables and information. And if they get the money to have the team there, then the team will need to be reminded who they report to, who is actually paying for these buses, you and I through our taxes, and that we have a right to be heard. And consultation is written into the National Bus Strategy. It's there in the Bus Service Improvement Plan, but we will need to keep lobbying and keep working to make changes. I know you've all put your names and where you live or where you're reporting from in the chat. I would ask you if you have specific problems to let us know, either through our website and its contact page, or we have an email that you can report direct to, and I'm sure someone will put that in the chat in a minute. I see a number of hands up, so I might stop at the moment and just ask for a couple of comments. I think John and Peter Simmons I can see. John? That's
yes,
John.
Good evening.
Hassel.
John Hassel, I'm councillor for Copford and Oak on the Somerset West and Taunton Council. I've always been interested in public transport, so it comes as no surprise that my comments will be about coordination between bus and train. We've got a problem in Taunton at the moment. It would be nice if more buses went to the station, but this is in the planning stage at the moment as to what's going to happen. More bus services will be required as railway stations and branch lines are reopened. I'm thinking specifically of Wellington because some of the outlying villages don't have bus services. And the Woollavington branch, which goes out to Bristol Temple Meads, a network of local bus services, or indeed DRT might be the answer for some of those villages. But they need to get, if you need to get to Bristol quickly, or one of the other towns around or cities around, the transport hub at these stations are important. Consultation partnership between council and bus operators is long overdue, because it seems to have been a bit laissez-faire, if you like, over the last 3 or 4 years in particular, over the bus station as a particular example. I like the idea of the 6-monthly review. If things are going badly in one area, why are they going badly? You can come up with some answers, and you can alter the plan accordingly. Somerset Enhanced Partnership, that's what they call it. Hopefully it'll get rid of some of the tribal aspects of things, because the bus station in Taunton was partly owned by First, and it's now under the Somerset West and Taunton control, and will go into the new unitary. Apart from First buses and National Express services, the bus station was not usable by any other company. They had to park round the corner. Poor relations, it seems. But hopefully with this enhanced partnership, all the companies will be working together to provide a better transport system for the area. The only other thing I wanted to ask was concerning purchase of the buses. Does the authority need to purchase the buses, or could they not be leased?
I think those are all good questions, and they highlight the fact that the bus service improvement plan needs to be a living document. Things will change. As you say, we have a number of railway stations around the county that could possibly open during the foreseeable future, and each of those will make a change to what is required. And again, I look to you as the local people who will know and be in touch with what is needed, so that we can get the information and the suggestions for change into the council as soon as possible, when some of these stations particularly will change the requirements. So what I want to hear from you is how you think a network of representatives like this can actually work. I don't believe meeting as a group of 60 or 70 people is going to work to do the detail work. We can do it from time to time to highlight where we've got to and what's happening generally. Peter,
well, if enough people understand the Zoom system, you could have a series of smaller sort of subcommittees that look at a particular issue. Let's say, for example, Wellington Station and the surrounding villages getting a decent transport system going, and that sort of thing. Obviously, we've got 4 district councils at the moment. If we had, say, 12 subcommittees for specific areas within the county, then we might be able to achieve a lot more. Because, for example, Route 25, there's so many places en route which have got parish councils that are concerned about the service, have the ideas about how it could be enhanced, etc., etc.
That's a very good suggestion, because one of the suggestions we had was to set up groups or individual representatives for particular routes. And if you want to meet as a group to thrash out a particular problem on a route, that's also a good idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Peter.
We've done that very successfully.
Sorry.
This part of Somerset with the D2 route into Bath, where we've had Zoom meetings with all the parish councils and town councils on that route. And then we've been able to go to First Bus, who's now the operator of that route, and talk to them about the views that came forth. I think what we want to consult with Somerset, but we also want to find a way of consulting with each other, so that it's not just what one particular village is saying, but it's a combined view where we think about the problems of the route, and then we go and talk to the operator. And I think that's something that the Somerset Bus Partnership can facilitate, given that we now have 80 representatives from across the county. I mean, that is a unique network of people interested in buses, keen to improve buses. And yes, it's 80 in Somerset, but it's probably half a dozen in my part of Mendip and half a dozen in the Wells part of Mendip. And those subgroups can be very effective in pulling together ideas. And I think that's what we need to try and encourage, in addition to having larger meetings.
Peter Simmons, you had a hand up, I think,
Yes.
a couple of times.
Thank you, Tony. Amazingly, what I've been wanting to say for a few minutes follows on directly from what the last two speakers said. Here in Somerton, we're served by a bus that goes from Yeovil to Taunton, and another one that goes from Yeovil to Wells. And I have no idea at the moment whether or not my adjacent parish councils, big and small, are represented on this in these 80 people. So I'm going to cut everybody's time short by simply saying, could we please have information as soon as possible on these other 79, 80 people that are involved with this meeting tonight and have given their apologies. And then people like me can see who else is living along the 54 and 77 routes, which are quite lengthy and actually join our principal towns. So I would look forward to that information. Once I have that information, then I could start to plan a coordination with my neighbours, and we could think about these two bus routes, other bus routes, Martock, for instance. And I've got to get this in. Nobody's mentioned Castle Carey. I find that incredible. It's a perfectly good station with a strict service to London, and we have a 12-mile gap between us and that station with no bus services of any sort. But my main point is, please can I have information on all the parish councils involved in this as soon as possible, and I will start to do my bit towards a liaison between the more local people, shall we say, to myself. Thank you.
I'm sure the people in Wales and St Cuthberts would endorse your comments about Castle Carey. They feel very strongly about it.
I remember that from the last meeting, yes.
I would assume anybody here is, because they want to be part of this, it has no objection to us circulating names and details. For GDPR reasons, we would probably have to put a disclaimer at the bottom saying we assume you're going to be happy with this, and you'll have to withdraw if you're not. Barbara, I saw a hand, I think.
you very much. We live 3 miles to the south of Taunton, the county town, and you've already heard that we have no bus station. It went from bad to worse. You couldn't, first of all, get into the waiting room. Therefore, no toilet facility, no shelter in the rain, etc., etc. Now there is no bus station functioning at all in the county town, and it is absolutely dreadful. I live 3 miles south of Taunton in Corfe. We have no buses. We do have on this road quite a big sixth form college of high reputation, public school, large comprehensive school, no public transport. And we're starting at scratch. So whereas I'm listening to a lot of people talking about improvements to service, we would like a service. Now, the geography of this area is that it's very hilly going up to the Blackdown Hills. We can't have coach-sized buses. We could really do with a jiffy bus sort of park and ride on the south side to take traffic from Honiton and from the Blackdown Hills areas. But also we're desperate for some public buses. And I would be interested to know from one of you in the know about the starting blocks for this, really, please. I have witnessed some excellent bus services as well. I've commended to you in the chat column a service that I was using in the west of Scotland, going up towards Oban, and is a very rural area. They do use an app. You can book your seat. You do everything either on the app in advance or by contactless card as you board, but you can book it so they know what size buses to put on where and when. You can then track where your bus is just before in case it's been delayed somewhere. And they have sort of like village agents, we would probably call them, who are happy to help people who do not have apps. So you can usually ask your neighbour, and I don't think we should be inhibited from thinking about using smartphones because we think everybody hasn't got one. So most of us have a neighbour who's got one or a relative who's got one, and they can book these things for us on our behalf. So I would commend that site. I put it in the chat. It's called West Coast Motors. Have a look at the service they provide because it is brilliant. And please can I have some help with starting our request for buses at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. I did say we would try very hard in this meeting not to look at individual problems because there are 55 of you, there are 80 possible representatives, there are an awful lot of people who have individual problems. Getting a bus service where there is none is an enormously difficult problem. It was not taken seriously, I don't think, in the bus service improvement plan. But what they did pick up on was the government's suggestion that we should look at demand responsive services like the one you've described. South Somerset have started work on a pilot project. This is recognised in the BSIP, and there is talk in there of the county taking it further. Sorry, I also wanted to come back to you on bus stations because we've made a lot of fuss about Taunton bus station in particular, but in fact all the bus stations in the county do get a mention in the bus service improvement plan. So again, they are part of the bid for money. Part of that 163 million, which I think tonight we've probably already overspent 3 times. And assuming we get it all, some of these things might happen. I'm trying not to be cynical. It is a massive opportunity. There are things there, but we will need to keep pushing for them. I'm sure between us we have the expertise in people who have started bus services from scratch, even run them as a local authority, a local town council initiative. I keep coming back to Bedminster, just across the border, that runs the Saturday service between Bridport and Yeovil, Bridport and Crewkerne, and it was run and is still run by volunteers from the town council. So these things can be done, but it needs somebody local, as you said, somebody who can help with the fact that most of the offerings that are coming out of county and coming out of anywhere these days are internet based and mobile phone based, but they're with local people who can fill in the gaps and talk to local people and show them how to use an ordinary phone if that's been set up, so that a digital demand response service doesn't become divisive and is only available for those with technology, but is in fact available to everyone. I see Elizabeth's hand up. Elizabeth? Or was that a mistake?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Sorry, it's not Elizabeth. Elizabeth is my wife. I'm using her iPad. John Anderson, and this evening I'm representing Castle Carey. Whether I carry on doing that or not, we'll wait and see. So I was interested in the comments about Castle Carey earlier. What's concerning me most is I'm just trying to work out how serious Somerset County Council are about all this. I was rather hoping there might be some representation on this group of Somerset County Council, but I gather I'm getting the impression this Somerset Bus Partnership group is a sort of separate maverick organisation, a lobbying organisation, rather than being part of Somerset County Council. Now, I've had trouble over the last 2 years. We did some campaigning a couple of years ago in Castle Carey, had about 40 people and had about 10 or 12 comments on things we'd like to see improved in the bus service. I sent these comments to Somerset County Council, South Somerset District Council, and nobody was interested. Now I'm wondering, will this change? Will the setup of this organisation cause this sort of relationship to change with Somerset County Council? Are they serious, is my question. Thank you.
As you say, Somerset County Council are not represented here as far as I know. I would ask the same question, but there is a great pressure on the authority from central government. The whole thrust of this new bus strategy is that they need to be serious. We need to bus back better, in the phraseology used in the bus strategy. We set ourselves up as an independent group specifically to take advantage of these ideas of consultation. They need hard work to make them happen, but we need to pick up on the ideas that you have, and we think we have the expertise to help you try and make those cases again. I think every village, every parish I've talked to have issues with their bus service that they have tried more than once to get some response on. But we're supposed to be in a climate emergency, in a time of bus back better, and that we have now, I can say, we represent 80 groups here in the Somerset Bus Partnership, and we have the ability to try and make some of these points a little harder. I can't guarantee.
Tony, if I just pick one point up, it's changed. We get 226 million, 0.5 at the moment for buses in England, Department for Transport, to keep them running. Everything is funded by the state. There's no private bus companies running as private bus companies as we speak tonight, even in places like Bath and Bristol or Exeter. So the point is, this is a statutory instrument. If Somerset wants to have any funding for their bus services come April next year, if they don't go through the process, as Tony says, of Bus Back Better and the bus service improvement plan, then they simply will not get paid for the bus services they run now. So it really is important. This is a change in the law from the deregulated 1985 Act and the 2000 Act to basically a new way of running buses brought in by the COVID period, the same place with the trains. Government's taking control of them really through the private operators.
Yep.
So that's the background.
Okay.
And effectively,
Yep.
I was going to say, try again in Castle Carey, and into the person in Corfe. Then we were very successful, and I was involved in it in a Wales to Webmore and Burnham-on-Sea parish initiative with the MPs and John Woodman. And perhaps we need to look at that with the parish councils getting together, as Tony said. But there is also one in, but it's not run by volunteers, it's run by paid drivers from Mendy Community Transport. I think it's now Somerset West. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, David, thank you for that. We are at a point of change, I think. And there are people within the county who don't necessarily have the same views as they had or their predecessors had 5, 10, 20 years ago. I have to be positive. We have to look and say, this is an opportunity to try and get something done about our absolutely appalling bus service in this county. Ian Walker, can you unmute?
Unmute.
Yes.
Sorry. Ian Walker from Hulse Parish Council. I just want to support Barbara a little bit, actually, from Corfe to start with. The point she was making, I think, was specific about Corfe, but actually it's a very general issue for those rural villages in Somerset. And after all, we are a rural community as a whole. And I think there's lots of people that would share Barbara's points there. I've looked at, before, in fact, this all started, I was already looking at bus services that we might be able to improve or actually get in Hulse. We've got no bus service here whatsoever, just like Corfe. And two opportunities that I've considered. Well, one is the Slinky bus. So we do actually have a bus opportunity if you include that, except anyone who has a car isn't allowed to use it. So if we're looking to try and reduce traffic, then that's not a very positive thing. I think the rules for the Slinky bus should be changed to permit people who do have a car or access to a car to be able to use that, if only so that they've got a car which they might use for longer journeys, but more local travelling. The Slinky bus would probably do. Having talked to Slinky Direct, I get a serious impression that they are very underused and almost desperate for passengers. So I think those two elements would work well together. The second thing that I've tried to consider for our parish, and it could be an easy fix, I think, more generally, is to look at the bus services to schools. So Barry's operates a bus through Hulse, which stops at 3 villages before it ends up in Riverliscombe with a secondary school. That bus then travels back to Taunton in the morning empty. Similarly, in the afternoon, it comes out from Taunton, sits in a lay-by just outside Riverliscombe for about an hour, and then tootles into the school and picks up the kids and takes them home. I know that Berries are very interested in operating with us as a community to run an opposite service, so that in the morning it goes to the school with kids on board, and then the return journey, even if it was only once a week, would be back through those same villages, picking up people who wanted to go into town at about probably 10 o'clock, spend, say, 4 hours in town, and then around 2 o'clock in the afternoon get picked up again once they've been to the bank, been to the supermarket, had a coffee, and come back out to these rural areas. There is an aging population in our village, and again, that's not unusual. This is what is happening, and there are more and more people now probably driving that should not be driving, of an age, and then there are younger people as well who would just find it far more opportunist to be able to catch a bus rather than take their car and try and find somewhere other than Morrison's to park at. So there are, I think, it's fairly simple fixes. If the council could to look at the contract that they operate with school buses, for example, and make that almost a necessity that they don't run backwards and forwards, empty, but actually serve the population instead, would be a good fix. And if Slinky could operate to people that do own a car but don't want to use it just to go into town, how about that as a simple fix?
Thank you, Ian. It's ideas like that that we need to keep coming. When we met a couple of months back, we were saying the government said this improvement plan must be innovative and have great new ideas. So we had some of them, we put some of them in. A lot of them were around, demand responsive services or how to use school buses better. The county at the moment would say they haven't got the people to look into it. But one of the first things they're asking for under this plan is some new staff to actually do some of the things that are in the plan. Some of them don't need more money. They just need somebody with the time and the interest to do something about it. And I think that interest, I've seen glimmers that interest is there among some of them. If they have this additional staff, if we have some ideas coming from you, particularly as our representatives, ideas I've been saying for 5-10 years, we must find other ways of funding buses. Local authorities do not have the money. If the government gives us £163 million, that isn't actually going to last very long. And unless it's put into some wonderful pilot projects that actually become successful, it's going to run out very quickly. And that money is going to need to be topped up. And some of the politicians have understood that at government level as well, that, to maintain this, we will actually have to prove that the bus service improvement plan was a good idea, it worked, and we'll need further funding in the future. And those are ideas to keep in mind as well, and to keep lobbying your MPs. I come back to where we started. I think that, lobbying the government to say that Somerset has a particular problem. Dave would want me to say, and the rest of the Southwest. But let's, at least keep our MPs pushing for as much of this 163 million as we can get, to say that Somerset has a very specific rural area problem and that its bus service is one of the worst in the country and that we need to do something about it. What we have said we'd do is let you all know, pass you around each other's contact details. If anybody doesn't like that, please let us know, but we will try and we will have to assume that you all want to be in touch with other people doing the same thing. If you can find somebody in the parish near you who hasn't been to this meeting and hasn't responded to our requests, we could do with a few more. 80 sounds good, but it's a lot less than the number of parishes in Somerset. I'm not going to go into a debate on how many that is at the moment. But thank you all very much for coming and giving of your time this evening. We will call another general meeting at some stage, but most of our communication will probably be by email, through the website and by social media.
Tony, is there anybody in the room, because I don't know them all and people could, this Bus Back Better legislation and finance will also go into the House of Lords, the transport spokes there. We've got some active lords in the county of Somerset and ladies. Those on parish councils that know them, because I think they were former county councillors to be sure, may want to make sure they're in contact. So it's all the political push you can get in London, because at the end of the day, it's about the allocation for the Southwest region, and then Somerset will get a percentage of that. So that's where we need to go, and it's about a political exercise with London now, and that means also the parish councils, of course, and town councils. There's no reason why they can't write to Baroness Fear, the buses minister, or write to Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Transport, as a parish council. They might not always get the reply they want, but I would recommend to everybody who's got that parish council chair to write the letter supporting Somerset. And if you're in a cross-boundary situation like Peter Travis is, it's very, very important. If your bus services cross the boundary and they're jointly funded, then we make sure you're talking to both local authorities, because that's the only way we kept the D2, that's the Froome to, that's the only way we keep the Froome to Bath service going. And for those in Wales, you're very lucky the Metro Mayor lives in Pensford, because he's the one funding the Glastonbury Street Wales Bristol service.
Thank you, David. I think that's a message of something that we can all do now. If you've got specific problems in your area, then come back to me, to Peter, to John, or to Glenn, or through the website, or through the email address that we put up a little bit earlier. I don't think there's anything else we need to say. Peter, is there anything you want to say to wind up?
No, I think it's hopefully people have found it useful. Useful to know what exactly Somerset is looking to get out of the government. I think one of the initiatives, and it's come up in the conversations today, would be perhaps useful to set up district-wide Zoom meeting. So in my case, to set up something in Mendip, just to explore issues, because there are a lot of connectivities in Mendip, as there are in other districts. It might be useful to set up such a meeting. But picking up on John Andrews' point, and I'm sorry, the person from Somerton, I mean, networking, Peter Simmons from Somerton, thank you. I think networking is one of the key benefits of what we've set up here, which is why we're going to circulate the information so that you can contact each other. But networking with neighbouring villages on the same bus route as yours, the same towns as on those bus routes, I think is possibly a unique benefit. I think one of the advantages we haven't mentioned about Somerset Bus Partnership is that we're getting to know the officers in Somerset. And if you know an officer, it's much easier to get through to them than if you're just emailing them cold to either a formal address or you don't have the relationship. We're beginning to get into the sort of dialogue that we want to get into, and we're going to work very hard in developing those dialogues, because by talking to people, you can make them appreciate the issues in a better way than sending them sometimes documents. So I think the fact that we're now increasingly in dialogues, and we're going to be working on that very hard, could be very useful. There's an awful lot to do over the next 6 months by Somerset and by us, and no doubt by you. You'll decide how much time you want to put into it, but you'll only get a better bus service if you really battle for it. It's a lesson I've learned to my cost. You really have to fight very hard and stick with it. Otherwise you won't see any improvements. At least now there is a prospect of some money to make it happen. And so we need to make sure that that money is spent wisely.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you everyone for coming. It's 9 o'clock. I think that's quite long enough. We will be in touch. You will be in touch with us, I know. We would look for, I think we did say we'd like a report once every 3 months or so. It doesn't have to be a long report, but just what issues are affecting you. If we haven't been in touch before, then at least perhaps we could have a report by the end of the year and another one in March. April is going to be a very significant time. It's when the money starts to flow and when the enhanced partnerships with the operators have to be complete. So, yes, we will call another meeting of the whole group, but I would also be happy to set up a group for South Somerset. I'm sure John and Glenn will for Swat and Sedgemoor. Okay, thank you for your time. Good to see you, and we will be in touch.